This story is based on true events. To protect the privacy of everyone involved, no real images are shown. The visuals you see are symbolic, not connected to the case. At The Only Witness, we tell the truth with respect, not exposure. They promised forever. But forever ended before sunrise. What should have been the beginning of a lifetime together became the end of everything in just a few hours. This is a story about love, trust, and how quickly joy can turn to unspeakable horror. If you're ready to hear the truth about what happened on the night Amelia and Marcus Reed's fairy tale became a nightmare, stay with me until the end. And make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications for The Only Witness, because we bring you real stories that matter. Stories that will make you hold your loved ones a little tighter. Also, drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community around the world. They promised forever. Those were the words Amelia spoke through tears of joy as she stood at the altar on a warm September evening in Savannah, Georgia. Her hands trembled as she held Marcus's, and when he slipped that simple gold band onto her finger, everyone in that small church knew they were witnessing something genuine. Real love. The kind that makes you believe in happily ever after. But what no one knew, what no one could have possibly imagined, was that forever would last less than 6 hours. What really happened in that house between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m.? That's the question that haunted investigators, traumatized a community, and left a young widow searching for answers that would never bring back the man she'd just vowed to spend her life with. Before we dive deeper into that horrific night, let me tell you about who Amelia and Marcus were, because understanding their story makes what happened to them even more devastating. Amelia Grace Thompson and Marcus Anthony Reed were both 29 years old when they got married on September 15, 2022. They'd grown up in Savannah, just a few neighborhoods apart, but didn't actually meet until they were both volunteering at a community food bank during the holidays in 2018. Amelia was a third-grade teacher at Parkside Elementary, the kind of teacher kids remembered forever because she made learning feel like magic. She stayed after school to tutor struggling students, bought supplies with her own money, and knew every single child's story, their struggles, their dreams. Marcus was a physical therapist who worked primarily with veterans and accident survivors, helping people rebuild their bodies and their confidence after trauma. His patients loved him because he never gave up on them, never let them quit on themselves. Their relationship developed slowly, built on friendship first, then something deeper. They bonded over their shared faith, their commitment to service, their love for their community. Marcus proposed on the same corner where they'd first met at that food bank, got down on one knee in front of dozens of volunteers and clients who'd watched their relationship grow. Amelia said yes before he even finished asking. Their engagement lasted a year, not because they needed time to be sure, but because they wanted to save money for a house instead of spending it all on a wedding. They were practical, thoughtful, the kind of couple that made plans and stuck to them. When they finally set a date, they kept the wedding small and intimate. Just 75 guests, close family and friends, held at Amelia's childhood church with a reception in the fellowship hall. No expensive venue, no elaborate decorations, just love and community and the people who mattered most. Everyone who attended that wedding said the same thing afterward. It was beautiful, simple, filled with genuine joy. Amelia wore her grandmother's vintage lace dress, altered to fit her perfectly. Marcus wore a navy suit his father had helped him pick out. They wrote their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room when Marcus promised to love Amelia through every season, to be her shelter in every storm, to choose her every single day for the rest of his life. The reception was everything they'd wanted: good food, lots of laughter, dancing until their feet hurt. Amelia's students had made them a banner that said "Best Teacher, Best Couple Forever." Marcus's therapy patients chipped in to buy them a beautiful photo album. The whole evening felt like a celebration of not just their love, but of the community they'd built together. When the night ended around 10:30, Amelia and Marcus said their goodbyes, got into Marcus's truck and drove to their new home, a small 3-bedroom house they'd closed on just 2 weeks earlier. If you're still watching, make sure you subscribe to The Only Witness right now. Hit that button, turn on the bell, because the stories we tell here aren't just entertainment. They're real lives, real tragedies, real lessons about how fragile everything we love can be. And comment below, let us know where you're watching from. Are you in the US, UK, somewhere else? We want to hear from you. Now let's continue with what happened next. Amelia and Marcus made the decision not to go to a hotel for their wedding night. They wanted to wake up in their own home, start their marriage in the place where they'd build their future together. The house was in a quiet neighborhood on the east side of Savannah, tree-lined streets, families who'd lived there for generations, the kind of place where people still waved to each other and looked out for their neighbors. It wasn't a wealthy area, but it was safe, or at least it had always felt that way. There had been a few break-ins over the past 6 months, mostly garages and cars left unlocked, but nothing violent, nothing that made anyone truly afraid. Marcus had installed new locks on all the doors when they moved in. They had a security system, though they hadn't activated the monitoring service yet because they were trying to save money. They felt secure. They felt safe. They had no reason to think that night would be any different. They arrived home around 11 p.m., exhausted but happy, still wearing their wedding clothes. Marcus carried Amelia over the threshold, both of them laughing, and they spent a few minutes just sitting on their new couch, shoes off, talking about the day. Who gave the best speech? Which moment made them cry? How perfect everything had been. Amelia took off her grandmother's necklace and set it on the kitchen counter. Marcus loosened his tie. They talked about showering and going to bed, about how tomorrow they'd start packing for their honeymoon, a modest trip to Charleston they'd planned for the following week. Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. But outside, in the darkness beyond their porch light, 2 men were watching. 2 men who'd been at their wedding earlier that evening, not as guests, but as part of the catering crew hired to serve food and clean up. 2 men who'd spent the night studying the layout of the reception hall, listening to conversations, learning where Amelia and Marcus lived, noticing the jewelry Amelia's family wore, calculating what they could take and how easy it would be. Sometimes, evil doesn't need a reason. It just needs a door left unlocked, and while Marcus and Amelia had locked their front door, they'd left the back door open just a crack to let in the cool night air. It was a small mistake, the kind anyone could make, especially when you're tired and happy, and completely unaware that anyone would want to hurt you. At approximately 1:15 a.m., while Amelia and Marcus were asleep in their bedroom, 2 masked men entered through that back door. They moved quietly at first, searching the downstairs for valuables, taking Amelia's jewelry from the counter, Marcus's wallet from the table, a laptop, car keys, anything they could grab quickly. But then, one of them knocked over a lamp. The crash echoed through the small house, and within seconds Marcus was awake. He told Amelia to stay in the bedroom, to lock the door and call 911. Then he grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and went downstairs to confront whoever was in his home. What happened next is difficult to talk about, and I'm going to be respectful in how I describe it because this isn't about sensationalizing violence. This is about honoring the memory of a man who died trying to protect his wife. Marcus encountered the 2 intruders in his living room. He shouted at them to leave, raised the bat, demanded they get out of his house. Instead of running, they attacked him. One of them had a crowbar. There was a struggle, chaotic and brutal. Amelia, upstairs on the phone with 911, could hear crashing, shouting, Marcus calling her name. She begged the dispatcher to send help immediately, said her husband was fighting someone, that she was terrified. The dispatcher kept her on the line, told her to stay hidden, that officers were on the way. But Savannah PD was 8 minutes out and Marcus didn't have 8 minutes. The intruders beat Marcus with the crowbar, struck him multiple times in the head and chest. When he fell, they didn't stop. They didn't just rob him and leave. They made sure he couldn't chase them, couldn't identify them, couldn't fight back. And then they ran, grabbing what they could on their way out, disappearing into the night through the same back door they'd entered. Amelia stayed locked in the bedroom until she heard sirens, too afraid to go downstairs, praying that Marcus was okay, that help would arrive in time. When police finally breached the front door and cleared the house, they found Marcus on the living room floor, unconscious and barely breathing. Amelia came running down the stairs, still wearing her wedding nightgown, screaming his name. Paramedics worked on him for 20 minutes but couldn't stabilize him. He was pronounced dead at 2:47 a.m. at Memorial University Medical Center. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. He'd been married for less than 4 hours. Before we continue, I need you to do something for me. If this story is affecting you, if it's making you think about the people you love and how quickly everything can change, show your support for this channel by subscribing right now. The Only Witness brings you these stories not for shock value, but because they matter. Because they remind us to cherish what we have and to demand justice for those who've lost everything. And please, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Building this community matters to us, and we want to know you're out there. Now let's talk about what happened after that terrible night. The early morning hours of September 16th, 2022, were a blur of flashing lights, yellow crime scene tape, and a young widow who couldn't comprehend how her wedding night had turned into the worst night of her life. Amelia was interviewed by police while still in shock, wrapped in a blanket provided by paramedics, her voice barely above a whisper. She told them everything she could remember. The sound of the lamp breaking, Marcus going downstairs, the shouting and crashing, hiding in the bedroom, calling 911. She hadn't seen the attackers clearly, only heard their voices briefly. 2 male voices she didn't recognize. She told investigators about the unlocked back door, about the jewelry on the counter, about how they'd just wanted one quiet night in their new home. Her wedding dress was still hanging on the back of the bedroom door, the flowers from her bouquet still fresh on the nightstand. But the man she married was gone, taken from her by strangers who cared more about stealing a laptop and some jewelry than about the value of a human life. Detectives worked through the night processing the scene. They found signs of forced entry at the back door where the lock had been jimmied open. They found the crowbar abandoned in the bushes outside, wiped clean of prints but covered in blood. They found Marcus's phone smashed on the floor. They found Amelia's jewelry box empty. And they found something else. A partial fingerprint on the kitchen counter, left by someone wearing gloves that had torn during the struggle. It wasn't much, but it was something. The investigation became the highest priority for the Savannah Police Department. Detective Laura Simmons, a 20-year veteran of the force who'd worked hundreds of cases, took lead. She'd seen a lot of tragedy in her career. But something about this case hit different. A young couple, good people who dedicated their lives to helping others, attacked in their own home on their wedding night. It was senseless, cruel, the kind of crime that shakes your faith in humanity. Detective Simmons assembled a team and got to work immediately. They started by interviewing everyone who'd attended the wedding, checking alibis, looking for anyone with a motive or a criminal history. They came up empty. Amelia and Marcus didn't have enemies. No one wanted to hurt them. This wasn't personal. It was random violence, which in some ways made it even more terrifying. The break in the case came from the catering company. Detective Simmons learned that the wedding reception had used a small local catering service that hired temporary workers for events. She obtained a list of everyone who'd worked that night and started running background checks. 2 names jumped out immediately. Darnell Pierce, 26, with prior convictions for burglary and theft, and his cousin, Jamal Stevens, 24, with arrests for breaking and entering and assault. Both had worked the Reed wedding as part of the setup and cleanup crew. Both had access to the reception hall where guests had been talking openly about Amelia and Marcus's new house. Both had been seen by multiple witnesses, hanging around longer than necessary after the event ended, asking questions about when the couple would be leaving. Detective Simmons brought both men in for questioning. They denied everything at first, said they'd gone straight home after work, that they had nothing to do with any break-in. But then forensics came back with a match on that partial fingerprint. It belonged to Darnell Pierce. And when investigators searched phone records, they found calls between Pierce and Stevens at 1:35 a.m., right around the time of the attack, and again at 2:10 a.m., right after they would have fled the scene. The evidence was piling up, but Simmons needed more. She needed to place them at the house, needed to find the stolen items, needed something concrete that would hold up in court. The break came from a pawn shop. 3 days after the murder, Jamal Stevens walked into a pawn shop on the west side of Savannah and tried to sell a laptop and a gold necklace. The pawn shop owner, who'd been alerted by police to be on the lookout for items from the Reed home, stalled Stevens and called the cops. Officers arrived within minutes and arrested Stevens on the spot. The laptop was Marcus's. The necklace belonged to Amelia's grandmother. Stevens tried to claim he'd found the items, then changed his story and said someone else gave them to him, then finally admitted that he and Pierce had broken into the house but claimed they never meant to hurt anyone, that Marcus had attacked them first and they'd defended themselves. It was a lie that fell apart under the weight of the evidence. The brutality of the attack, the multiple blows, the fact that Marcus was found in his own living room defending his home. This wasn't self-defense. This was murder during the commission of a felony. If you're still with me, thank you for taking the time to hear this story. Make sure you're subscribed to The Only Witness so you never miss our investigations. And comment below. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Your engagement helps us grow and tells us these stories matter to you. Now let's talk about justice. Darnell Pierce was arrested within hours of Stevens's confession. Police found more stolen items from the Reed home hidden in Pierce's apartment, including Amelia's jewelry box and Marcus's wedding ring, which Pierce had taken off his finger after the attack. Both men were charged with felony murder, burglary, armed robbery, and aggravated assault. The Chatham County District Attorney made it clear they would seek the maximum sentence. This wasn't just a robbery gone wrong. This was a premeditated home invasion that resulted in the death of an innocent man on what should have been the happiest night of his life. The trial took place 8 months later, in May of 2023. Amelia attended every single day, sitting in the front row, often holding Marcus's mother's hand, forcing herself to relive the worst night of her life over and over as witnesses testified and evidence was presented. She testified herself, describing the sounds she'd heard, the terror she'd felt, the moment she realized Marcus wasn't coming back upstairs. She described hearing him call her name, hearing him fighting for their lives, knowing he was trying to protect her. She broke down on the stand, had to take multiple breaks, but she finished her testimony because she wanted the jury to understand what had been taken from her. Not just a husband, but a future, a family, a lifetime of moments they'd never get to share. The prosecution painted a clear picture of two men who'd targeted the Reeds, who'd used their access as catering staff to gather information, who'd waited until they knew the couple would be home and vulnerable, and who'd attacked Marcus with lethal force when he tried to defend his home. The defense tried to argue that Marcus's death was unintentional, that the intruders had panicked when confronted, but the forensic evidence told a different story. The number of blows, the severity of the injuries, the fact that they'd continued to beat him after he'd fallen. This wasn't panic. This was brutality. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. They found both Darnell Pierce and Jamal Stevens guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge called the crime heinous, senseless, and utterly devoid of humanity. Darnell Pierce was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jamal Stevens, who'd cooperated with investigators and shown some remorse, was sentenced to 45 years. Both men are currently incarcerated in Georgia state prisons. Neither has filed an appeal. The Reed family issued a statement after sentencing saying that no amount of prison time would bring Marcus back, but that they hoped justice had been served, and that no other family would have to endure what they'd been through. Amelia Reed has spent the past 2 years trying to rebuild a life she never imagined she'd have to live alone. She stayed in Savannah for the first year, went back to teaching because her students needed her, and she needed the routine, the purpose. But being in that city, in that house, surrounded by memories of what should have been, became too much. She eventually moved to North Carolina to be closer to her sister, started fresh in a new school, a new community. She's in therapy, working through trauma and grief that most people can't comprehend. In an interview given on the 2nd anniversary of Marcus's death, she said that she thinks about him every single day, that she still wears her wedding ring. That part of her will always be 29 years old standing at an altar making promises she didn't get to keep. But she also said something that stuck with me. She said that evil tried to take everything that night. It took Marcus, it took her sense of safety, it took the future they'd planned. But it didn't take her will to live. It didn't take her capacity to love, to teach, to make a difference. She said Marcus had spent his whole life helping people heal, and the best way she could honor him was to keep doing the same. She volunteers at domestic violence shelters now, helps women who've survived attacks in their own homes, advocates for better security systems and community awareness programs. She's turned her pain into purpose, and while that doesn't erase what happened, it means Marcus's legacy lives on in the lives she touches. Make sure you subscribe to The Only Witness if you haven't already, because we bring you stories like this, stories that remind us how fragile life is and how important it is to protect the people we love. And please comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global community. This case exposed some important realities about home security and the vulnerability we all face. Marcus and Marcus had done what many of us do. They locked the front door but left a back door open for air. They had a security system but hadn't activated it yet. They lived in a safe neighborhood and didn't think they needed to be paranoid. And those small decisions, those tiny moments of feeling secure in your own home, created an opportunity for two predators who were watching and waiting. I'm not saying this to blame the victims. This was not Amelia and Marcus's fault. The only people responsible for what happened are the two men who made the choice to break into that house and take a life. But it's a reminder to all of us to take those extra precautions, to lock every door, to activate those alarms, to be aware that evil doesn't always announce itself. Detective Laura Simmons, who worked this case from the beginning, said in an interview that this investigation changed her. She'd worked homicides for 2 decades, but something about responding to a crime scene where wedding decorations were still visible, where a bride was still wearing her nightgown, where a groom died defending the home he'd just moved into with his wife, it haunted her in a way few cases had. She said she hoped the conviction and sentencing brought some measure of peace to Amelia and the Reed family, but she knew that justice in a courtroom could never truly balance the scales when a life has been taken. The best they could do was ensure the people responsible faced consequences, and that the community understood how this happened so, maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't happen again. The Reed family established a scholarship fund in Marcus's name for students pursuing physical therapy degrees, especially those who want to work with underserved communities. They've raised over $50,000 so far, and 3 students have received scholarships to help pay for their education. Amelia contributes to the fund every year and stays in touch with the recipients, telling them about Marcus, about his passion for helping people, about the kind of person he was. She wants his name to mean something beyond tragedy. She wants people to remember him for how he lived, not just how he died. This story doesn't have a happy ending because real life doesn't work that way. Marcus is gone. Amelia's life was shattered. 2 families are destroyed, the Reeds who lost a son and brother, and even the Pierce and Stevens families who have to live with what their sons did. But there is something to take away from this. There's resilience, there's the strength of a woman who refused to let evil have the final word. There's a community that rallied around her, that showed up at the trial, that contributed to the scholarship fund, that proves that even in the darkest moments humanity can still shine through. Evil tried to take everything that night, but it didn't take her will to live. Amelia Reed is still here, still teaching, still making a difference, still carrying Marcus's memory with her every single day. And in a way, that's its own form of justice. The men who killed Marcus are locked away, forgotten by everyone except their victims. But Marcus is remembered, honored, celebrated through scholarships and stories and the lives of the students Amelia continues to teach. That's the legacy. That's what endures. This is The Only Witness. Real stories, real pain, real strength. We tell these stories not to traumatize you, but to remind you that life is precious, that the people we love should never be taken for granted, and that justice, while imperfect, still matters. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you want to hug your loved ones a little tighter tonight, then it served its purpose. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another investigation, turn on notifications, and most importantly, comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you in Chicago, New York, London, Lagos? We want to build a community of people who care about truth, about justice, about honoring the memories of those who've been taken too soon. in memory of Marcus Anthony Reed, whose love story ended too soon, but whose legacy continues through every life his wife touches. Through every student who receives a scholarship in his name, through every person who hears this story and decides to lock their doors, activate their alarms, and protect the people they love. Thank you for watching The Only Witness. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember that in a world full of darkness, we all have the power to be someone's light.